Okay, this week we will do the last ice of the mimer of the beer of Shir Nivanova. That's on Daf Yud Aleph Amid Aleph, and then there'll be another piece, the mimer L'Susi Berichve Pare. Okay, so he says, and after he explained now that through the Loisasa we reach a level that's higher than revelation, a level that is higher than even what Soiviv Kolalman, and reaches, and he says, to the Atzmos Mahus that we get through Loisasa. He says that now Zion Vacher calls, after all this beer, the white and the black and everything else, will understand the meaning of the pasuk Mipnei Seva Takum, that one should stand up before one that is old. V'hadarta Pnei Zaken, you should give honor to the face of the elder. And it says V'reisam Alekecha, and you should fear God. Ani Hashem, I am Hashem. So he explains in the Likkutei Torah of Arizal, in the Taimei Mitzvahs, at the end of Parshas Doshim, that what does it mean before an older one, before Seva Takum, you should stand up? That refers to the beard of Arachampin, which would be, as we said before, the white hairs. And then Vadarta Pnei Zaken, that you should give honor to the one who's the face of the old. That is the beard of Zah, the black hairs that we mentioned before. So he said, how can you say, the Alter Rebbe asks, how can you say in a person down here that you should stand up before and be Arich and Zah? That there's no thought that could grasp God, and it says no man can see God. You can't see God and live. So how are you comparing that the standing up for a person is the idea of standing up for Arich? Only that the idea is that the kavanah, the intent here is the fulfillment of Torah mitzvahs, that they come from the beard of Arachampin and the beard of Zah, as mentioned before, positive and negative commandments. So the positive come from the beard of Arachampin and the negative come from the beard of Zah. And when a person fulfills the mitzvah and he's mahader, now it says Vadarta Pnei Zaken, when you do it in a way of Hidur mitzvah, according to the law, then you're fulfilling. In other words, you do it scrupulously with an added beauty. So then you're fulfilling this idea of standing up for the seva, for the one who's older, and even and also Vadarta Pnei Zaken, right? Because you're fulfilling the mitzvah in a beautiful way. You're honoring it. It says even more so, according to what it says in other places, that the mitzvahs are called the shluchim, the messengers of Hashem, and the shliach of a person is like him himself. If so, this is mamish. This is the idea of getting up, standing up, and giving honor to the elders, would be this idea because you're honoring the shliach of Hashem, the mitzvah that's his shliach, which comes from Arich and Zah. And then he says, and included in this is also the honoring a Talmud Chacham and standing up for a Sefer Torah, as explained in the Zohar in the Parshas Doshim, that Rav Amnuna, the elder, when he would see a Sefer Torah, he would stand up and say, Seva Takum, you stand up for the elder. He said, this is what we hold. It brought down in the Gemara Kedushin that B'pnei Seva Takum, that you can get up for somebody who's old. This means Zakin v'Chacham, a wise man but is old. And then on the other hand, Vadarta Pnei Zaken, you should give honor to the face of the elder. That is one who acquired wisdom, even if he's very young. So he said that's meaning, like we said here in Likkutei Torah of the Arizal, that Pnei Seva Takum, that refers to the beard of Arachampin, which that's the older, which that is what we said, that the Atik Yoimin, his hair is the white, like the white beard, which that is the white hairs, right? Mitzvah Saseh. On the other hand, Vadarta Pnei Zaken, that is the young, which is the beard of Zah, which is its ends are hairs, are curls of black. Only what does it mean? He acquired wisdom, that he brings it from the concealed manner, as it is in the higher worlds, into a revealed manner, that it comes from the Chachmas Tima, etc., and you reveal it in Malchus, etc., and in the lower worlds. And it explains in Idra that because these black hairs and dark ones, about them it says that you reveal the depth from the darkness. That in other words, specifically through the fulfillment of negative commandments and the idea of the depth of the Chachma Ilah, we say Amku Machshavei Secha, the depth of your thoughts, as we explained before, Ba'arichas at length, as we said at the end of Oishei. Then he continues, it says further in the verse, V'reisam Alekecha, you should fear your God. So he explains there in the Likkutei Torah, this is the level of Malchus, the Nukva, which is the feminine level, the Malchus of Atzilus. And the idea here is that this refers to not the mitzvah saseh, mitzvah loisaseh, but this refers actually to Torah Shebal Peh, the oral law, which comes from the level of Malchus, as we say, Malchus Peh, the kingship is through mouth, or Torah Shabbat Peh Karinan law. We call it the Torah of the mouth because a king rules his country by mouth, and many other reasons why the idea of Dibur is specifically connected to the level of Malchus. So we see that the 7 mitzvahs that are rabbinic and all the other limitations and boundaries that come from the words of the rabbis, it's all included in Malchus. And that's also what it means. It sounds like it's mashma from the Zohar that he says there that Rabbi Shimon said from here is a hint to Torah Shebiksav and a hint to Torah Shebal Peh. And as it says in Mikdash Melech there, that Torah Shebal Peh is the level of feminine, level of Malchus. And this it says V'Yereisa Melikach. Yereisa is in a feminine term. And the idea here is that Malchus in essence is lower than Zah, right? And for sure it's lower than Arech. And therefore it says on it, Sa'arech, Ke'eder ha'izim, that your hairs are like the flock of sheep. In other words, it's a lower level of hairs. And therefore it has to say on this V'Yereisa, you have to fear. Why? Because in truth, even though it's lower, you might think it's less, but no, the truth is that it's more strict. The words of Torah, the words of the rabbis, even in the words of Torah, and it's known from the idea that it's sweeter upon me, the words of the rabbis, of Divrei Seifim, even more than the wine of Torah, that in other words, its source, as we mentioned many times before in this mimer, comes from the level of Sefer, the scribe, that's higher than the written Torah, which is only the level of the Sefer of the book. And this is also what it says in other places, and in the meaning of it says an extra understanding was given to a woman, even more so than a man, which goes on the oral law, which what does that mean? That this idea of the 7 mitzvahs, of the rabbinic mitzvahs, like Natilas Yadayim, washing one's hands, and making an Eruv, and the lighting Hanukkah candles, etc., they are all to push away the external and evil levels, just as any other level of a negative commandment. Yet, like we see through the washing of one's hands, it's that the evil level should not be able to take nourishment from the fingernails. And this happens through the mitzvahs, the rabbinic mitzvahs, through a positive act, which in Torah Shebiksav you couldn't have such a thing. And it only happens through negative commandments. But in Torah Shebal Peh, we're able to have this through the 7 mitzvahs D'Rabbanan, which are positive commandments of the rabbis. And this is the extra bina, the extra understanding that was given into a woman, because they could, with positive, accomplish what before which in Torah Shebiksav could only be accomplished through the negative. And generally, it's also explained that the whole reason we listen to the rabbis is based on that you're not allowed to not listen to the rabbis. It's a negative mitzvah. And in that negative mitzvah, we have these positive mitzvahs, meaning we're drawing positive revelation from a place which is negative and beyond revelation. And this is the extra understanding. Be'isha, through Torah Shebal Peh, we're able to accomplish even greater than you could with Torah Shebiksav. And you should look in the explanation of what it says, so you should bless the Jewish people, an idea that how could I not lift and my show favoritism to the Jewish people, that I wrote that you should eat and you should be satiated, and then you should bench. In other words, the obligation is only when you're satiated, which means you have to eat a much of a kibetza, an egg size. But the Jewish people, they are medactic, they go beyond for them on themselves, and they bench even on a kazayas, on an olive size. In other words, that they are able to draw down from even higher than what they were able to draw down from the written Torah. And look also in what it says in Parshas Matos, V'shama avia es nidra. And therefore it says on this, V'yareisa me'elikacha, that you shall feel God, the level of Malchus, which we call Torah Shebal Peh, should be feared, and you should respect it even more. Okay, and then look also in the Maimer Kaldoidi about the Harim and Gvois, the mountains and the hills, which are the forefathers and the mothers. And let's understand also the idea of Torah Shebiksav and Torah Shebal Peh. And then comes the end of the pasuk that we're talking about. This is Ani Hashem, I am God, that it's all really one. And you look what it says in the Maimer of Shemseta Tishmeru, but all one, meaning the mitzvah sasa, the mitzvah sloisasa, and the Torah Shebiksav and the Torah Shebal Peh. Ultimately, it's all one. It's all the Eibishter that we connect to, and it's all the Eibishter that we revealed. And with that, we finish this Maimer. The second half of this week's daf will be the Maimer L'Susosi Berichvei Paroi Demisicha Rayasi. And the simple meaning of the pasuk is that my beloved, in other words, my Rayasi Demisicha, I compared you L'Susosi Berichvei Paroi, to a horse in the chariot of Paroi. So the Alter Rebbe, this mimer is on Yud Aleph Amud Beis, and this will be again second half of this week's stuff. So the Alter Rebbe begins with the pasuk that it says in Iksiv, it says that God does not desire the strength of the horse. So, and he's going to explain this pasuk later on in the mimer. So he says the idea here is that we see it says ki sirkav al susacha. The pasuk is ki sirkav al susacha markaveisacha Yeshua. This is speaking about the Eibush there, and it says when you ride on your horses. So here the word is ki, and the Alter Rebbe right away says here the word ki is from the term im, if. In other words, if you ride on your horses, which means there's a lot of types of horses, or better said, mistake, a lot of types of merkavis, a lot of type of chariots for the Eibush there. We have the chariot of Yecheskel, which there we see the face of the lion, the face of the ox. And then we have the merkavis of Zechariah, the chariots of Zechariah, where we find black horses and white horses. And also it brings their other color horses. And I think that is the at the end of the mimer where he mentions he speaks there about how the Eibishter presented himself at the Yamsuf in every type of horse that Pare rode. And that's hinted to in these different color horses. Anyway, also we say in the Gemara that at night, what does the Eibishter do? He rides on a chruv, a light chruv, and he flies through 18,000 worlds. Or goes through 18,000 worlds. And so he said this is like, for example, a king, that he has different types of chariots. Sometimes he uses this chariot, this horse and wagon. Sometimes he uses a different type of wagon. And all these levels of the Merkava are what? Are only with regard to the level of Adam Ha'elyon, the supernal man. Meaning Adam Ha'elyon here represents, and we've learned this a little bit before, that there's the Adam Shala Kisei. Adam Shala Kisei is the level of Adam, the level of 10 spheres, as it's revealed in a lower world. Generally, Makar Yecheskel is that what it is in the world of Bria, and you have the world as it is in the world, the lower worlds. You have the lower Makavis, but it's the idea of the 10 spheres, and it is in a full form of the 10 spheres, of it is in Axilis, and as it resides and gets revealed into the lower worlds. But no matter, because that's what it says, that on the vision of the throne is a vision in the look of man, which what does man mean? Here he explains, I said before 10 spheres, but in more detail, it is that this is the Alter Rebbe says 248 mitzvahs aseh, which they represent the 248 commandments, which they are the 248 limbs of a king. And also you have the 365 negative commandments, which they're the 365 gidin, sinews, which these are the levels of light and vessels. As we know, he says that the sinews are the light, and the kalim are the 248 limbs, which they are the kalim. And the 365 gidim, the sinews, they are the level of the light that they draw down as in a person. The blood is drawn down from the soul throughout all the other limbs through the sinews, and the actual limbs, they are the vessels that do different things. And as we know, the Chacham said that Yud-Kei, the letters of Yud and Hey of Hashem's name with Shemi equals Shin Samach Hey, and Zichri with Vav Hey equals the 248. So we see that the lower levels, Vav Hey, they are with the mitzvah saseh. So he says the 365 mitzvahs saseh, they are from the level of Yud-Kei, which is the Ur, and the Ramach mitzvah saseh come from the Vav Hey, which that is the lower level, but together it makes up Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, and this is the Bechina of Adam. So this man, this level of man, which is a level of light and vessel, which is to draw down the light of the Ur and Sof, that it should, and its light into the lower worlds, in a descent and an evolvement in the 6 days of creation, in the first day in the level of Chesed, and the purpose of this all, of this descent and evolvement of the light of Ur and Sof in the 6 days of the week, is that there should be an ascent afterwards, on the day of Shabbos, as it's known, that a descent is always for the purpose of a greater ascent. So he says, and that is through the birur, through the refinement of all the garments of the world of Noiga, of the things that are mixed of good and bad, during the week, during the days of the week. And therefore, you have to be able to accomplish this, you have to draw down the light of the Ein Sof from the level of Adam, because why? Because specifically it's the way of a man to conquer and to make war and to force the evil or to transform it. And therefore, when you have the idea of God the Eibishter coming down into the world, it's in the level of Adam, and that's what does he use to come down? That is the level of the Merkava, the chariot, and different types of chariots. And therefore, it's always, whenever we have the Eibishter coming down into the world to change and to refine the world, we call it Bechinas Adam. And so he says, but it says in the verse, in the pasuk, so actually it's a pasuk that has similar words, Sus Muchan La Mochama, and the pasuk, and if you look in, 1 second here, in the pasuk actually is, Yud Aleph Gimel. It's in Mishli, and it says there Liyoy Mochama. Yeah, it says Liyoy Mochama. Sus Muchan Liyoy Mochama. But really, the idea is that we know that a king is not allowed to have a horse other than what he needs for his chariots. Other than that, it says Layarbeloi Susim. He can't have more horses. And so, what horse is he allowed to have? Sus Muchan Mochama. And so this is the pasuk. It says sus muchan l'mochama, a sus that he needs for war. In other words, to go down to a place of war, there has to be a level of a horse that runs. Just like a horse that runs to a place that a person can't reach by himself because it's very far. The same way, because of the great descent from the great mountain, in other words, the high place, Me'igra Rama, from the high place where godliness, so to speak, and with regard to our realm, we call it much high, we call it very high, that it should come, that Ein Sof Baruch Hu, that the light of the endless light, like its name is, which is an that's endless, and it has no tachlis, and no purpose, has no end, that it should be able to be revealed, and should reside in the lower worlds, in the Tachtonim. It has to be through what? Through these chariots of horses running. And therefore, Yishayin Yecheskel, who they were in the time of the Beis HaMikdash, or at least very close to that time, which they saw were the Jewish people were in a high state of spirituality. So then the light of the Aaron stuff that came in descended and was lowered. It wasn't so low in the weekdays. In other words, it wasn't so distant and wasn't so different than the light that there was on Shabbos. And therefore, they saw the chariot in a face of a lion and a face of an ox. Which in those situations, those are the angels that we say that these angels of these angels, we say the Chayas, they carry the chariot, but they also get carried and uplifted with the chariot. In other words, that the chariot carries them, the throne carries them, and also they're not so distant, that they have some connection in some way to the light of the Ein Sof that's riding upon them, and so therefore it's in the form of a face of a lion, face of an ox. On the other hand, Zechariah, who he saw the Merkava at a level of horses, which they were running, and they're not carried at all by the revelation of godliness that's upon them. In other words, they're not within the realm. They have no understanding in that which is riding upon them at all. But this, like the horse, is like like the level of letters, which they have no intellect within them of themselves. That means, yes, through letters we can understand an idea, but there is no idea in a letter. Letters are not intellectual. They have no depth to them. And that is the reason. And the reason for this is because the descent into the exile is a descent that is not in the regular realm of evolvement of the world. Rather, it is letters that have come and descended from the highest of the high, and they've descended and enclosed themselves in the lowest of the low. On the other hand, Yeshai and Yecheskel, they saw in the Merkava, they saw the face of the lion, the face of the ox, which they refer to the way midas, emotions, in other words, are taken from wisdom, which is a normal way of the evolvements of the world, and how it gets enclosed, wisdom itself, into midas, into emotions. And look at the difference between how the midas receive from intellect to the way it is by letters in the Maimer Vayitzer as Adam and Parshat Bereishis. So the simple meaning here is that wisdom automatically, when somebody has an idea about something, they actually develop a love or a fear or a midah to that thing. And that midah is a direct connection, and one is related to the other, and and they're close to one another. On the other hand, when we talk about wisdom, ideas, as they come down in letters are totally foreign. They're not something that thinks, they're not something that feels, they're almost like rocks. It's almost like saying that you have ideas in rocks. Yes, these rocks, these oisius, they give over intellect, but they're so removed. They're so far. It means a revelation that is not through the normal system. It's already gone yesh me'ayin. It's already gone to something totally different, in a whole different domain. Through the idea of letters, it now could give over some intellect and create a new idea, a new feeling within the new person. But ultimately, the transformation, or the transmission, that happens through letters means that there's a divide, there's a separation. And this is what we have with the idea of horses, that they're the level of letters. And so he says, just as descent is on a level of a horse, so to the ascent is also through the level of a horse. As it says, Nafshi v'sicha balayla, my soul it desires you, it thirsts for you at night. And he says, in a moment he'll point out the word ivisicha is the same letters as the word oisius, ois of letters. Meaning, in the time of the Beis Hamikdash standing, so then my soul, ivisicha, without any reasoning, without any understanding, it has this desire for God, but how? Through the level of letters. So he says that this idea of letters and horse that we said is running, this is what it says in the pasuk. Ksiv, it says, Ad mehera yorutz dvarai, that very quickly your words run. In other words, the Eibishter's words get accomplished very quickly. But he says that this is the idea of the horse that's running to a place that a person by himself can't reach. In the same way it says that the earth is the footstool for your feet, which means that the earth lifts up the Eibishter, and especially the level we call here the feet. And as you look in the first mimer of Torah, he speaks about this at length. The idea of Haaretz Adom Ragloi, that through Torah Shabbat and through mitzvahs we lift up, we lift up the world and the Eibishter. And so he's saying here, when just the way the earth does it is small, but the horse, it's able to run to a place that your feet cannot grasp. And that's specifically in the time of the Beis Hamikdash standing, which then there's no power on the feet to be able to be carried and to carry the life force of the Ein Sof. That's Allah Kisei, that's in the chariot. Then you have the idea of the horse that runs to the highest of high, to the highest of realms, higher even than the level of Adam that is on the chariot. Because the level of Adam that's on the chariot is only Adam Elyon. It's comparable to what's supreme. It's comparable. It's similar to the Elyon. But on the other hand, the Elyon itself is much higher. And he says, look in the Maimvat and the Tzavim, which there he explains this idea of Elyon being beyond that which is revealed, and the same concept that Elyon itself is higher than the level of Adam. So the level of Adam Shalak Kisei, that is what's being driven by the horses and by the mainly the Chayas of the Pnei Aryeh and Pnei Shir to descend into the world, and then they get uplifted to go back to that level. On the other hand, the horse, it could go much further down, and it could even go much higher up, and it's able to reach beyond the level of Adam. And specifically, the horse could do it. In other words, almost the same way that it doesn't understand what it's doing when it comes down, the way it does its avodah, so too it reaches a place that's beyond understanding. And that's what it says. Like it says in the pasuk, Hashem ish Muhammad, that Hashem is the man of war, which meaning that which God has called the name Ish, man, is specifically when he's in war. In other words, that's when he's called Isher or Adam. But in truth, we say, it says in the pasuk, Kilei Adam hu li'nachem ksiv. He's not a man that he changes his mind, but it says Kilei Adam hu. He's not a man, in other words, he's much beyond that. And even though this is a level of a horse, that you'd have no understanding to understand the rider that's upon the horse. In other words, you don't know what's riding you. In other words, what's riding us is hidden from us. Yet it has this advantage and this quality that it's able to bring the one who is riding to a much higher place than the rider would be able to get on his own. So look also what it says in the Maimer Vilvush Malchus, in the idea of the horse that the king rides upon him, which he says there that the running of the horse is much greater than that even that the kruv does. And in other words, that the horse riding, the letters could accomplish much more even than the level of Kruv, and reach a much higher place. And look also in the Maimer B'Kibla Yehudim, Parshat B'Shalach, Chaz Yasher Moshe, Ashir Ki Go Igo. In those Mamorim, a lot of it explains that a sus, the idea of a horse, is double level sag. So sag, sus is 63 times 2. So sag, we know, is a revelation from the world of Bina, as we've spoken about before. And this level of sag comes with a certain level of yeshus, a certain level of self. On the other hand, the level of beyond, of Adam, is a level of mav, bittul, of total nullification. And we're saying through the level of yesh and through the level of sag, you're able to reach much higher and to be able to accomplish much more than just with bittul itself. He said, but the power that there is in this power of the horse, so it says, not with now this is back to the pasuk he mentioned at the beginning of the Maimer, it says he doesn't desire the strength of the horse. In other words, that it's not the strength of the horse, not of its own, is why it's able to accomplish this. Rather, it is because God loves, He wants, He desires those who fear Him, the ones who yearn for His kindness, which is a kindness of the Eibishter Himself, in His own glory and self. And when meaning here, mahusay v'atzmusay, the essence and the identity, so to speak, the being of God, of the Ein Sof, that it should become and evolve and descend down here. That's what comes down to affect the ascent of this horse. And this is the revelation, this is the level of the dew that drips from the level of Atik on Shabbos, which that is, we said before, that the descent is during the days of the week, but the ascent is during the time of Shabbos. So on Shabbos, when there's a time that the dew drips from Atik, that is to ascend, that this is the drawing down of the light of the Ein Sof from the very beginning of all levels, all the way down here to give power and strength for the ascent of this horse. And that's what it says, like similar to what it says in Parshat B'Shalach on the Maimer L'Susasi. He says that there's different types of horses. There's feminine horses and there's masculine horses, which they refer to a arousal from above is referred to a masculine horse, and a arousal from below is considered a feminine horse. But that and one affects the other. In other words, the male horse arouses the female horse. But there's another level, which is the arousal from above, which are the masculine letters, which they come not because they were aroused at all. And that is about what is drawn down from the level of Atik itself, and from there comes the power and the strength that the horses could actually ascend through this arousal from below. And look also what it says in the Maimer of Yermeshech Lu'ayoim about Merdatol. So simply, that generally we say that what we arouse from above has to first be aroused from below. So first there must be a sata, a feminine horse, that arouses the later masculine horse, which is a new revelation down here. But then he says that there's another type of masculine horse which precedes the feminine horse, which gives the strength for the feminine horse to actually ascend and to reveal anything. And that comes from a place much higher, which is this level of the dew that falls on Shabbos. And that is what he says. This is the meaning now of the pasuk. It's like to the horse and the chariots of Pare. Specifically, a horse in Pare's chariot have I compared you, my beloved. Why? He says, just like in the Lu'umazah, in the Klippa, in other words, in the side of evil, there's a level of a horse in the chariots of Pare, of Klippa, which they're the godly life force, which is in them, is not understood or grasped by them whatsoever, that they should become nullified because of it. Rather, it's so to speak, removed from them, gives them chayas, but at the same time is, so to speak, aloof from the actual animal. It's only the way of makif above them. And it's a level of levina, zaka, the white levina that is in the ketores, in the incense, like we spoke in the previous Mamorim, and that's why they're able to call God. They call him the God of gods, because they see themselves as being their own self and powerful of their own, and God is only, so to speak, above them. The same way, in other words, not within them, above them. So the same way, the same way I compare you, my beloved. In other words, here he translates the word rayasi, my beloved, also to mean parnasasi, meaning my sustainer. that the Jewish people, they sustain and they get sustained. Now, where they sustain God and they get sustained from God, which is the idea, which is food, which is an inner life and light force that comes within the world through Torah mitzvahs. Because just like a food, it brings life from the brain and the brain of man to all the other limbs and gives them life and living. The same way, when I say Rayasi, sustainer, it means that that the Jewish people sustain the worlds. Through what? Through God being within the worlds. So he says even this is compared to the level of a horse in the chariots of Parai. In other words, because it comes from a level that is aloof, that is beyond us. Because the Torah and the mitzvahs, they're able to elevate a man like the level of the horse. And so he's going to go into this a second here in the footnotes, this concept which he just introduced, that all of a sudden he's saying not just letters, but even Torah mitzvahs that we do could elevate a person like the horse. That means not only is Torah mitzvahs, the regular lechem and mazon, the regular bread and the regular sustenance that just connects the limbs, as we said before, that's all within the world of Adam, within the world of man. The revelation of God that could be revealed and is seen. But we're speaking here, horses are beyond that. And he's saying is that through Torah mitzvahs, we are able to, so to speak, affect even beyond like the horses. In other words, just as the horse here is a level of makif, and it's beyond, so too there's a level of makif within the Torah mitzvahs of the Eibishter himself that we reach. And as we mentioned in a previous mimer, we said, that if those who transgress God's will, there is this added makif, this added inner light that is aloof and cannot be revealed, how much more so those who do the desire, how much more so that must be there, and it's there in a more real and a more effective way. And so this power is coming, as we said, Dimisicha, what am I comparing you to? The sus parai. That what there is in the sus parai, you have in your power too, through Torah mitzvahs itself. And so look in the Ramaz, Pashas Kisit Tzeitze, and he says that the heichal, the room, so to speak, of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, in other words, the way godliness gets revealed, it's being run, it's through horses. So you look in Sefer Shalbeinim and Tanya Perek Nun Beis, and he says, what is the garment that you're able to go above, beyond, in the Heichal Kodesh HaKadoshim? And there he explains at length the Maila and the Torah mitzvahs and what we accomplish there. And so you can see also there in what it says in the Maimar Shapsuz at Ishmairu, Umikdashi Tiro, that he says specifically Mikdashi, which is the idea of halacha. He says there Dal Damashal halacha, that specifically that even today, in a time when there's no Beis Hamikdash, brings about an inner revelation as it was in the Beis Hamikdash within a person and within the world, etc. And from there we understand what he's saying here, that the Torah mitzvahs itself could affect and could raise a person, etc., like the horse. And also look in the idea of letters of Torah in the Mamorim of the Reach Shmanecha, which we have learned before. And this is what it says, and like it says in the pasuk, that a person does v'chai bohem, and he lives in them, meaning that the Taicher he's translating is that Yasa Oisam Ha'adam, meaning that we make and we fix the level of Adam, that he should be able to ascend higher and higher to a level Kilay Adam, to a place beyond the level of Adam itself, as we said before, to the level of Elyon itself, to the level of we see God himself, not just the way he is revealed, but the way he is in his very essence, Vidal. And look also in what he said, this was B'dir Rabbi Shir Hashirim, which we mentioned already, in the Parsha B'Shalach, and other Ben Zoyar, etc. A good Shabbos.